The trees were only moving shapes against a cloudy sky backlit by the glow from the airport, not too far distant. Lewis parked the Honda on Mason Street. Mason bordered Pleasant View on its south side, and here the wind was... Why, thank you. Thank you. Mason bordered Pleasant View on its south side, and here the wind was almost strong enough to rip the car door out of his hand. He had to push hard to shut it. The wind rippled at his jacket as he opened the Honda's hatch and took out the piece of tarpaulin he had cut and wrapped around his tools. He was in a wing of darkness between two streetlights, standing on the curb with the canvas-wrapped bundle cradled in his arms, looking carefully for traffic before crossing to the wrought iron fence, which marked the boundary of the graveyard. He did not want to be seen at all, if he could help it, not even by someone who would notice him and forget him the next second. Beside him, the branches of an old elm groaned restlessly in the wind, making Lewis think of jackleg necktie parties. God, he was so scared. This wasn't wild work. It was mad work. No traffic. On the Mason Street side, the street lamps marched away in perfect white circles, casting spotlights on the sidewalk where, during the days after Fairmount Grammar School let out, boys would ride bikes and girls would jump rope and play hopscotch, never noticing the nearby graveyard, except perhaps at Halloween, when it would acquire a certain spooky charm. Perhaps they would dare to cross their suburban street and hang a paper skeleton on the wrought iron bars of the high fence, giggling at the old jokes. It's the most popular place in town. People are dying to get in. Why is it wrong to laugh in the graveyard? Because everyone who lives there is always in a grave mood. Gage, he muttered. Gage was in there, behind that wrought iron fence, unjustly imprisoned under a blanket of dark earth, and that was no joke. Gonna break you out, Gage, he thought. Gonna break you out, big guy, or die trying. Lewis crossed the street with his heavy bundle in his arms, stepped up on the other curb, glanced both ways again, and tossed the canvas roll over the fence. It clinked softly as it struck the ground on the far side. Dusting his hands, Lewis walked away. He had marked the place in his mind. Even if he forgot, all he really had to do was follow the fence on the inside until he was standing opposite his Civic, and he would fall over it. But would the gate be open this late? He walked down Mason Street to the stop sign, the wind chasing him and worrying his heels. Moving shadows danced and twined on the roadway. He turned the corner onto Pleasant Street, still following the fence. Car headlights splashed up the street, and Lewis stepped cautiously behind an elm tree. It's not a cop car, he saw, only a van moving toward Hammond Street and probably the turnpike. When it was well past him, Lewis walked on. course it will be unlocked. It's gotta be. He reached the gate, which formed a cathedral shape in wrought iron, slim and graceful in the moving wind, shadows thrown by the streetlights. He reached out and tried it. Locked. You stupid fool. Of course it's locked. Did you really think anyone would leave a cemetery inside the municipal city limits of any American city unlocked after 11 o'clock? No one is that trusting, dear man. Not anymore. So what do you do now? Now, he would have to climb and just hope no one happened to glance away from the Carson show long enough to see him monkeying up the wrought iron like the world's oldest, slowest kid. Hey, police, I just saw the world's oldest, slowest kid climbing into Pleasant View Cemetery. Looked like he was dying to get in. Yeah, looked like a grave matter to me. Kidding? Oh no, I'm in dead earnest. Maybe you ought to dig into it. Lewis continued up Pleasant Street and turned right at the next intersection. The high iron fence marched along beside him restlessly. The wind cooled and evaporated the drops of sweat on his forehead and in the hollows of his temples. His shadow waxed and waned in the streetlights. Every now and then he glanced at the fence, and then he stopped and forced himself to really look at it. You're going to climb that, baby? Don't make me laugh. Lewis Creed was a fairly tall man, standing at a bit over 6'2", but the fence was easily 9 feet high, each wrought iron stave ending in a decorative arrow-like point. Decorative, that is, until you happen to slip while swinging your leg over and force of your suddenly dropping body of 200 pounds into one of those arrow points into your groin, exploding your testicles. And there you would be, skewered like a pig at a barbecue, hollering until someone called for the police, and they came and pulled you off and took you to the hospital. The sweat continued to flow, sticking his shirt to his back. All was silent except for the faint hum of late traffic on Hammond Street. There had to be a way to get in there. Had to be. Come on, Lewis. Face the facts. You may be crazy, but you're not that crazy. Maybe you could shinny up the top of that fence, but it would take a trained gymnast to swing over those points without sticking himself on them. And even supposedly you can get in, how are you going to get yourself and Gage's body out? He went on walking, vaguely aware that he was circling the cemetery, but not doing anything constructive. All right, here's the answer. I'll just go home to Ludlow tonight and come back tomorrow in the late afternoon. I'll go in through the gate around 4 o'clock and find a place to hole up until it's midnight or a little later. I will, in other words, put off until tomorrow what I should have been smart enough to think of today. Great idea, oh great Swami Lewis. And in the meantime, what do I do about that great big duffel of stuff I threw over the wall? Pick, shovel, flashlight. You might as well stamp grave robbing equipment on every damn piece of it. It landed in the bushes. Who's going to find it, for Christ's sake? On measure, that made sense. But this was no sensible errand he was on, and his heart told him quietly and absolutely that he couldn't come back tomorrow. If he didn't do it tonight, he would never do it. He would never be able to screw himself up to this crazy pitch again. The only time for it he was ever going to have. There were fewer houses up this way. An occasional square of yellow light gleamed on the other side of the street, and once he saw the gray-blue flicker of a black and white TV, and looking through the fence, he saw that the graves were older here, more rounded, sometimes leaning forward or backward with the freezes and thaws of many seasons. There was another stop sign up ahead, and another right turn would put him on a street roughly parallel to Mason Street, where he had began. And when he got back to the beginning, what did he do? Collect $200 and go around again? Admit defeat? Car headlights turned down the street. Lewis stepped behind another tree, waiting for it to pass. This car was moving very slowly, and after a moment, a white spotlight stepped out from the passenger side and ran flickering along the wrought iron fence.